In the previous video, you saw a demonstration of how you can use our short schedule package. In this one, I'd like to show you how the package works under the hood. And it's actually quite a simple package, there is not too much code involved. In the previous video, you have seen that you should start the short schedule run command to actually start running your registered commands. And this is all it does. We are going to create a new loop object, which is part of React PHP. I'll explain what this loop does later on. We are going to pass the loop to the short schedule class. That class will register all the commands and it will run the schedule. Let's take a look at register commands first. Let's also put our demo application in view. What the register commands function will do is that it will take a look at the console kernel, so this class, and this piece of code will try to invoke this command, short schedule. Laravel's default schedule command is marked as protected. So I figure a lot of users of our package will mark the short schedule command as protected as well. So by default, our class can't call it, but using a little bit of reflection we can. Here we essentially make the short schedule method public in runtime, and then we are going to invoke that function. And we are going to pass ourselves as an argument. So remember, we are in the short schedule class. And here you can see it being given as an argument to the short schedule method. So on that schedule, users call a method command. So that command method should be somewhere here in this class as well. And here you have it. So the string given here, test, will be passed to this function, so command is test. And we will return a pending short schedule command object. Let's take a look at that one. In this class you can see every method that can be called after command. Because this function returns that pending short schedule command class, we'll also have auto completion here. So if I try to do something here, you see all those configuration methods we have in this class. So the pending short schedule command is basically a class that is responsible for getting the configuration of the command. Okay, let's jump back to our short schedule class. And you can see that we keep each pending command that we created in an array on this class. So that is all that is to register commands. If we take a look back at the artisan command class itself, after register commands, we call the run function. Let's take a look at that one. In the run method, we are basically going to do two things. We are going to wrap each pending short schedule command in a new short schedule command class. And we'll dive into this class soon. And next we are going to... And that loop, that is that class that I already mentioned earlier. Now is maybe a good time to explain what that class does. So that loop is part of a package called React PHP. React PHP is quite an amazing package. In a nutshell, it allows you to run PHP code in an asynchronous, non-blocking way, which opens the door for implementing a lot of interesting things, such as HTTP servers, WebSocket servers, and all kinds of real-time functionality. One of the basic building components of React PHP is a loop. And on this loop, you can register various callbacks. And you can say that these callbacks need to be executed on a regular basis. Here, for instance, we say that this callback should be run at this frequency of seconds. So if this command should run every second, that method here will return 1. And after everything has been added to the loop, then we will run the loop. And this method will never end. It will keep on executing these callables at the frequency you gave it. React PHP is a secret sauce that makes our Laravel short schedule package work. Let's take a look at the implementation of frequency in seconds. So there's nothing special going on here. We just return the frequency in seconds property that we have on the pending short schedule command. And in our closure, we do two things. We are going to check if the command should run, and if it doesn't, we are going to bail out. And if it should be run, then of course we will run it. Let's take a look at the implementation here. First, we are going to get the command that should actually be run. So let's take a look at our pending short schedule command where we are going to fetch this off. Let's dive into that class. And here you see the command. And if I scroll a little bit down, we should see the command function itself, which sets that property. And you can see that we prefix the command you gave us. So in our example, this was test with PHP artisan. Let's head back to our run method. We are going to use that command string to create a Symfony process. And the Symfony process class is an amazing class that is very handy for executing things on the command line. Next, we are going to fire off an event that will notify the rest of your application that we're about to start a short scheduled task, and then we are going to start it. And if you start a Symfony process, that means that it will be started in the background. So our code isn't going to wait until it finishes. So even if our process is still running, we are going to continue, and here we are going to notify the rest of your application that we have actually started a short scheduled task. Now you might have noticed that we keep the process as an instance variable of this class. Let's take a look at the constructor. And here you can see that a short scheduled command is basically nothing else than a wrapper around our pending object. And the only thing we have extra here is that process that we track. Let's go back to our short schedule class. So now you know what happens when a command runs. Keep in mind that this command will not only run once, but at the frequency of the periodic timer we added to the loop. And also keep in mind that when we run the loop, that loop will never finish. Okay, let's turn our attention to the should run method here. This method is responsible for two things. First, it will handle overlapping commands. So if the process of this command is running, and we configured our short scheduled commands that overlaps are not allowed, then we are going to decide that you shouldn't run this command right now. And the implementation of is running is very simple. If we don't have a process set yet for this command, then we're obviously not running. And otherwise we are going to ask the Symfony process whether it is running. Next, we are going to ask the pending short schedule command if it should run. And this one takes care of the extra constraints that can be put on, such as the between function, the environment function, and the when function. Let's take a look. And before diving in, let's refresh your memory to what a constraint is. So a constraint is something like this, between 9 to 5. So having this constraint in place will only run that command every second between 9 to 5. In the should run method, we are going to take a look at all the constraints. And if any of those constraints say that we should not run, then the should not run variable is true. And we are going to inverse that and use it as a result. So if should not run is false, we are going to return true. Now, what is a run constraint? A run constraint is just a simple interface, and any class that has a should run method can be a run constraint. In the file structure of this package, you can see that we have a couple of constraints available. Let's head back. On our pending short schedule command class, we have that between method. And that between method that adds a constraint to that constraints array that we use in should run. In the demo application, you saw me passing a start time and an end time to between, and we are going to pass that to the constraint. Let's take a look. And this constraint is a very simple class. The should run method will return true when the current time is between the start time and the end time. And we have some extra logic going on to handle lapses in days. But I'm not going to dive into that now. Let's take a look at another constraint, the environment constraint. And this is even more simple. This constraint decides that it should be run whenever the app environment is one of the allowed environments that is being passed. And let's maybe also take a look at the when constraint. It's also a very simple one. It gets passed a closure and it decides that the command where you put this constraint on should run whenever that closure returns a truthy value. So let's head back to pending short schedule command. So pending short schedule command decides that it should run when all the constraints also say that it should run. Let's head back to short schedule command. So if all those constraints say that we should run, then we return true here. And if a constraint says, hey, you shouldn't run, then we return false. And that is how this should run function works. So if a command isn't overlapping, or it allows overlaps, and all the constraints are okay with the command running, then we will run the command. And that is basically all there is to it. Like I've said in the beginning, there's not too much code involved. And I think that if you haven't used React PHP before, then that might be the hardest thing to wrap your head around. In the next video, we are going to take a look at how we test all of this. See you there.